You will be back on your knees within a month, Meredith. You have no skills, no connections, and without the family name, you are nothing. Those were the last words my father Bradford ever spoke to me as a father. He didn't shout them. He didn't have the decency to show emotion. He said them with the same detached clinical coldness he used when firing an underperforming junior executive. He stood behind his massive mahogany desk in the library, checking the gold watch on his wrist, as if my expulsion from the family was merely an appointment that was running slightly over time. My mother Phyllis sat on the velvet chaise lounge by the window sipping her afternoon tea. She didn't even look at me. She just smoothed the fabric of her skirt and murmured, "Let her go, Bradford. She's clearly too selfish to understand duty. When she's starving, she'll realize that marrying the Sterling boy was a kindness, not a punishment." It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-October. I remember the date because the leaves outside the window were a burning, vibrant red, a stark contrast to the gray, lifeless atmosphere inside that house. I was 20 years old. I was supposed to be in my junior year of university studying literature, but my parents had cut my tuition checks the moment I refused the engagement. The merger between our family's textile company and the Sterling manufacturing empire depended on a union of bloodlines. I was the collateral. My sister Charlene was too young and, quite frankly, too precious to them to be traded away. So the duty fell to me. "I am not marrying a man I loathe just to save your profit margins," I said, my voice shaking. I had packed one suitcase. Just one. It contained 3 changes of clothes, my journal, and a locket my grandmother had given me before she passed. "I would rather scrub floors." Phyllis finally looked up then. Her eyes were like ice. "Then scrub floors you shall. But do not think for a moment that you can use the name Kensington while you do it. You are a disgrace to this lineage. Leave the keys on the table." I placed my house key and my car key on the side table. The metal made a sharp clink against the marble surface, the sound of a bridge burning. I turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Part of me, the part that was still a frightened child, wanted to turn back and apologize, to beg for their forgiveness, and accept the life of a trophy wife in a loveless marriage. But the other part of me, a part I hadn't met yet, kept my feet moving forward. "Meredith," Phyllis called out, just as my hand touched the brass doorknob. I paused, hope flaring for a millisecond. "Don't come crawling back when the world chews you up," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We won't open the door. You are dead to us." I walked out into the crisp autumn air. I didn't have a car, so I walked 3 miles to the nearest bus station. I sat on a wooden bench watching the luxury sedans drive by, realizing that for the first time in my life, I had no safety net. I had $300 in cash, no degree, and a family that had just pronounced me dead. I boarded a bus heading toward the city, watching the manicured hedges of my childhood disappear into the distance. I cried for the first hour. By the second hour, the tears had dried, replaced by a cold, hard knot of determination in my stomach. They thought I would fail. They thought I was nothing without their money. I looked at my reflection in the bus window, pale, terrified, but free. I swore to myself then that I would die before I gave them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. 6 months later, I learned that freedom tasted like stale coffee and bleach. My parents' prediction about me starving hadn't come true, but I was close. I was living in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet in a rougher part of the city. The radiator hissed and clanked all night, and the view from my single window was a brick wall. But it was mine. I paid the rent with money I earned waiting tables at a diner called Sal's during the day and cleaning office buildings at night. My hands, once manicured and soft, were now chapped and red from harsh detergents. My back ached constantly. I was exhausted in a way that seeped into my bones, but I was also strangely alive. Every dollar I earned was real. It wasn't an allowance, it was survival. One particularly grueling Tuesday lunch rush, the diner was packed. I was juggling 4 tables when a woman walked in. She looked out of place immediately. She was wearing a tailored cream suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she carried herself with an air of authority that silenced the booth she slid into. "Just coffee black, and a Cobb salad dressing on the side," she ordered without looking at the menu. "Coming right up, ma'am," I said. She ate quickly, checking documents spread out on the table. She was clearly a woman of business, the kind of woman Phyllis would have socialized with but secretly envied. When she left a generous cash tip on the table. But as I went to clear the dishes, I saw something wedged between the booth seat and the wall. It was a wallet, deep burgundy leather, heavy. I picked it up. My heart raced. I knew what kind of wallet this was. I opened it to find ID Marjorie Whitmore and a thick stack of $100 bills. There must have been $2,000 in there. Credit cards, business cards. For a fleeting moment, the devil on my shoulder whispered, "That money is 3 months of rent. She wouldn't even miss it. You could buy a winter coat. You could fix your shoes." I closed my eyes and took a breath. I was poor, I was tired, and I was desperate. But I was not a thief. I was Meredith, and even if I wasn't a Kensington anymore, I had my honor. I ran out the door. The woman was just about to step into a black town car parked at the curb. "Ma'am, Ms. Whitmore?" I shouted, waving the burgundy leather in the air. She turned, startled. Her driver paused with the door open. I ran up breathless and held out the wallet. "You left this in the booth," I said, panting. "I didn't want you to leave without it." Marjorie Whitmore looked at the wallet, then at me. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. They scanned my worn uniform, my scuffed shoes, and finally settled on my face. She took the wallet slowly. "Thank you," she said. She opened it, checked the contents, and nodded. Then she pulled out 5 $100 bills. "Here, for your honesty." I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, thank you, ma'am. The tip you left on the table was plenty. I didn't return it for a reward. I returned it because it's yours." It was a distinct echo of the pride I had shown my father. "I didn't want charity." Marjorie paused. She tucked the money back into her purse and closed it with a snap. She looked at me with a new intensity. "What is your name?" "Meredith," I said. "Meredith Smith." I used the generic surname I'd adopted since leaving home. "Well, Meredith Smith, you have integrity. That is a rare commodity in this city." She pulled out a business card instead. "I own a real estate development firm, Whitmore Holdings. We are looking for an assistant. The pay is better than here, but the hours are longer, and I am not a patient woman. If you want a career instead of a job, call this number tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp." She got into the car without waiting for an answer. As the black sedan pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk clutching the card like a lifeline. Whitmore Holdings. I knew the name. They owned half the skyline. The next morning, I called at 9 a.m. exactly. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in Marjorie Whitmore's office. The contrast between Marjorie and my biological mother, Phyllis, became apparent within the first week of my employment. Phyllis believed that a woman's power came from who she married and how well she managed a household staff. Marjorie believed power came from competence, knowledge, and financial independence. "I don't care where you came from, Meredith," Marjorie told me on my third day after I had successfully reorganized her chaotic filing system. "I don't care who your parents are. In this office, you are what you deliver. If you are smart and hungry, you will rise. If you are lazy, you will be gone." Is that clear? "Crystal clear," I replied. I worked like a woman possessed. I was the first one in the office at 6 a.m. and the last one to leave at 8 p.m. I absorbed everything Marjorie did. I watched how she negotiated deals, how she navigated roomfuls of men who underestimated her, and how she used silence as a weapon. One afternoon, about 8 months into my employment, Marjorie called me into her office. She had a file on her desk. "You speak French," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I do," I admitted. It was one of the few useful things from my Kensington education. "We have investors from Quebec coming in an hour. My translator is stuck in traffic. You're coming into the meeting." I hesitated. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm just an assistant. I don't have the proper—" "Stop." She commanded, her voice firm, but not unkind. Do not apologize for your presence. You have the skill. Use it. Never shrink yourself to make others comfortable. That is a lesson it took me 40 years to learn. You will learn it today. That meeting was a turning point. I didn't just translate. I helped facilitate the deal. I understood the nuances of the negotiation and smoothed over cultural misunderstandings. When the investors left, shaking hands and smiling, Marjorie looked at me with a glimmer of pride that I had never seen in my own parents' eyes. You have a mind for this business, Meredith, she said quietly. We need to get you your license, and you need to finish your degree. The company will pay for night classes. I couldn't ask you to do that, I whispered, overwhelmed. It's an investment, she corrected me. I expect a return on it. Don't let me down. Over the next 5 years, Marjorie became more than a boss. She became the mentor and mother figure I had craved my entire life. She was tough. She demanded excellence. But when I made a mistake, she didn't banish me or call me a disgrace. She sat me down and asked, "How do we fix this?" I rose through the ranks. Junior associate, senior project manager. I bought my own condo, a modest one, but with a view of the skyline I was helping to shape. I drove a reliable car. I had a savings account. And most importantly, I had a sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to a last name. I still thought about Bradford and Phyllis sometimes. I wondered if they checked the obituaries looking for me, or if they had truly erased me. But as my life filled with success and genuine connections, their memory became less like a wound and more like a faded scar. 15 years. That is how long it took to build a life that was impregnable. By the time I was 35, I wasn't just working for Whitmore Holdings, I was running it. Marjorie had decided to step back into a semi-retired role as chairman of the board, and she had named me CEO. It caused a stir in the industry, a woman with no known family connections taking the helm of a billion-dollar legacy firm. But the numbers didn't lie. Under my direction, our commercial portfolio had tripled. It was during a site visit for a new luxury eco-hotel in Vermont that I met Franklin. Franklin was the lead architect on the project. I knew of him, of course, he was Marjorie's son. But he had spent the last decade working in Europe building a reputation independent of his mother's shadow. He was tall, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and hands that were always covered in graphite or chalk dust. You must be the legendary Meredith, he said, extending a hand as we stood on the muddy foundation of the construction site. My mother talks about you more than she talks about her prize-winning orchids. I laughed, shaking his hand. I hope the comparison is favorable. Orchids are notoriously difficult. She says you're the daughter she wishes she'd raised, Franklin said, his voice dropping a clearer, more serious tone. And having met you, I can see why. Unlike the arranged courting of my youth with the Sterling boy, which was all about mergers and acquisitions, my relationship with Franklin grew organically. We bonded over blueprints and zoning laws, over late-night takeout Chinese food in the office, and over long drives through the countryside. He respected my ambition because he had his own. He didn't want a trophy. He wanted a partner. 2 years after we met, Franklin proposed. Not with a family heirloom ring that symbolized an obligation, but with a diamond he had designed himself set in a band that looked like interwoven vines. I love you, he told me, not for who people think you are, but for exactly who you have built yourself to be. When we told Marjorie, she clapped her hands together and called for champagne. Finally, she exclaimed. I was worried I'd have to lock you two in a conference room until you figured it out. But as the wedding planning began, the old ghost returned. The question of the father of the bride and mother of the bride on the invitations. I can leave it blank, I told Franklin one evening as we sat in our living room, or I can just list myself. You could, Franklin said gently, or we could make official what has been true in your heart for a decade. He looked at his mother, who was sitting in the armchair knitting a blanket for a charity auction. Marjorie looked up, her eyes misty. Meredith, Marjorie said, putting down her needles. Walter and I have discussed this. We know you are a grown woman. We know you don't need parents in the traditional sense. But we would be honored, truly honored, if you would let us adopt you. Before the wedding. I stared at them. Walter Franklin's father and Marjorie's husband walked in from the kitchen with a tray of tea. He was a quiet man, a retired professor of history, who had always treated me with gentle kindness. "We want you to be a Whitmore," Walter said softly. "Legally, permanently, so that when you walk down that aisle you aren't walking away from a past, but walking with your family." Tears streamed down my face. For 15 years I had told myself I didn't need a family, but in that moment I realized how desperate I was to belong. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, please." The adoption hearing was a simple formality, but it shifted the tectonic plates of my universe. The judge, a woman in her 60s, smiled as she signed the decree. I ceased to be Meredith Smith, the alias of a runaway, and officially became Meredith Whitmore. My birth certificate was reissued. In the eyes of the law, Bradford and Phyllis Kensington no longer existed in my lineage. The wedding was held 3 weeks later in the gardens of the Whitmore estate. It was a day of sunlight and laughter. There were no stiff formalities, no business deals disguised as vows. I wore a gown of simple silk. Walter walked me down the aisle. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" Walter answered with a booming, proud voice, "Her mother and I do." I looked out at the crowd of friends, colleagues, and extended family. There was no cold judgment, only warmth. I felt a profound sense of healing. The hole in my chest that had been blasted open the day I left the Kensington mansion had finally truly closed. However, the universe has a strange sense of balance. While my star was ascending, another was crashing down. I hadn't kept tabs on the Kensington empire, but in the business world, news travels fast. The economic downturn had hit the textile industry hard, but bad management had hit Kensington Mills harder. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal a month after my wedding. Kensington Mills files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The article detailed a series of disastrous investments made by the company's vice president, Charlene Kensington, my younger sister. Apparently, the precious daughter had been given the reins and had driven the carriage straight off a cliff. The article mentioned that Bradford Kensington was being forced to liquidate personal assets to cover debts. The Sterling family, whom I was supposed to marry into, had pulled out of the merger years ago, sensing the weakness. I folded the newspaper and placed it in the recycling bin. "Everything okay?" Franklin asked, seeing my expression. "Just history," I said, kissing him on the cheek. "Ancient history." But the past wasn't done with me. A week later, I was featured on the cover of Modern Business magazine. The headline read, "The New Matriarch: How Meredith Whitmore is Redefining Real Estate." The photo showed me standing on the balcony of our newest skyscraper, looking confident, wealthy, and undeniably powerful. It was the kind of magazine that sat on every coffee table in the country clubs my parents frequented. There was no way they could miss it, and there was no way they could miss the name Meredith Whitmore. The first contact came via email. It was sent to my general executive inbox, flagged by my assistant Dolores. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dolores said over the intercom, her voice hesitant. "There's an email here from a Phyllis Kensington. She claims to be your mother. Should I delete it?" I sat frozen in my ergonomic chair. The city view behind me suddenly felt dizzying. "No," I said after a long pause. "Print it. Bring it to me." The email was short. It didn't apologize. It didn't ask how I was. "Meredith, we saw the article. It is surprising to see you have done well for yourself, though the name change is confusing. We are in the city for business next week. We should meet. Tuesday 1 p.m. at the Pierre. Do not be late. Mother." I stared at the paper. The audacity was breathtaking. Do not be late. As if 15 years hadn't passed. As if she hadn't told me I was dead to them. As if I was still the 20-year-old girl they could summon at will. "Dolores," I called out. "Yes, ma'am." Reply to the email. Tell them that Mrs. Whitmore's schedule is fully booked for the remainder of the year. Do not offer an alternative time. Yes, ma'am. I threw the paper into the shredder and watched my mother's words turn into confetti. But they didn't stop. A week later, the phone calls began. They called the main switchboard. They called the PR department. They tried to reach Franklin's firm. Your parents called again, Franklin told me one evening, looking annoyed. They told my receptionist that it was a family emergency. It is an emergency, Key, I said dryly. Their bank account is the patient and it's flatlining. Do you want to see them? Franklin asked gently. To get closure. I have closure, I said. I have a life. They are just ghosts trying to haunt a house they no longer own. We were hosting a garden brunch the following Sunday to celebrate the firm's 50th anniversary. It was going to be an intimate gathering of close friends, board members, and family at Marjorie and Walter's estate. I wanted to focus on that. I wanted to celebrate the legacy I was actually a part of. I blocked the numbers. I told security at the office to turn them away. I thought that would be the end of it. I forgot that desperation makes people bold. Sunday morning was perfect. The sky was a robin's egg blue and the air smelled of blooming jasmine. Marjorie's garden was a masterpiece of landscaping with white linen tables set up on the lawn. I was wearing a pale yellow sundress, laughing with Franklin and Walter near the fountain. Marjorie was holding court at the main table, looking regal in lavender. We were toasting to the future. To 50 years of excellence, Marjorie said, raising her glass of iced tea, and to the next generation leading us forward. Everyone raised their glasses to me. I felt a warm glow in my chest. This was peace. This was victory. Then the gate intercom buzzed. The estate was gated with a security camera and speaker system. The maid, an older woman named Beatrice, went to answer it inside the house. She came out a moment later looking flustered. Mrs. Whitmore, she said to Marjorie, but looked at me. There are people at the gate, a Mr. and Mrs. Kensington. They say they are Meredith's parents, and they were invited. The silence that fell over the garden was absolute. The birds seemed to stop singing. I did not invite them, I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. They are insisting, Beatrice said. They say they won't leave until they see their daughter. Franklin stepped closer to me, his hand on the small of my back. I'll go down there and tell them to leave. No, I said. I set my glass down on the table. The sharp clink reminded me of the keys hitting the marble table 15 years ago. If I hide, they win. They think I'm still that scared little girl. I need them to see who I am now. I'm coming with you, Marjorie said, standing up. Her face was set in a hard line. We all are, Walter added. I looked at my family, my real family. Okay, let's go. We walked down the long driveway together. The gravel crunched under our feet. As we approached the tall wrought iron gates, I saw them. Bradford and Phyllis stood on the other side of the bars. Time had not been kind to them. Bradford, once an imposing figure, looked shrunken. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting, hanging off his gaunt frame. His face was lined with stress. Phyllis, who used to never have a hair out of place, looked frayed. Her Chanel bag was an old season, scuffed at the corners. They didn't look like titans of industry anymore. They looked like desperate, aging people. But when they saw me, they straightened up. They tried to summon the old arrogance. Meredith, Phyllis said, her tone attempting to be authoritative but cracking slightly. Finally, open this gate. It's ridiculous to keep your parents standing in the street. I stopped 10 feet from the gate. I didn't signal for the security guard to open it. I stood there, flanked by Franklin and Marjorie, with Walter just behind us. You aren't my parents, I said calmly. My parents are standing right here. I gestured to Marjorie and Walter. Phyllis flinched as if slapped. Don't be dramatic. We gave you life. We raised you. You raised an asset, I corrected. And when that asset refused to be sold, you liquidated it. You told me I was dead to you. You told me I would die in the gutter. Bradford cleared his throat. We were harsh. We were trying to teach you a lesson about the real world. And look, he gestured vaguely at the estate at my close at Franklin. It worked. You made something of yourself because we pushed you. You owe us for that motivation. I actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You think you get credit for my success? You threw me into the ocean hoping I would drown. You don't get to take credit because I learned to swim. We are family, Phyllis cried out, her composure slipping. Your sister, Charlene, has made a mess of things. The company is in trouble, Meredith. We know you have resources now. We know you have influence. If you just stop, I said. Just stop. We are your blood, she screamed. Blood is biology, I said. Family is who picks you up when you fall. Family is who returns a lost wallet and offers a job instead of judgment. Family is who adopts you at 35 because they love you, not because they need a merger. Marjorie stepped forward then. She looked through the bars at Phyllis with a gaze that could cut glass. Mrs. Kensington, Marjorie said, her voice low and dangerous. I suggest you leave my property before I call the police for trespassing. Meredith is a Whitmore now, legally. She is my daughter. And unlike you, I protect my children. Bradford looked at Marjorie, then at the massive estate behind us, then finally at me. He saw the ring on my finger, the confidence in my posture, the wall of people standing beside me. He realized finally that he had no leverage. The transaction was over. Meredith, please, he whispered, his pride finally breaking. We have nowhere else to go. It was the truth. The rumors were true. They were destitute. I looked at them. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like watching a sad movie. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel fear. I just felt done. I took a step closer to the gate, looking my biological father in the eye. I won't give you money, I said. I won't bail out the company. I won't let you into my life. Phyllis began to sob, her hands gripping the iron bars. However, I continued, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out a card, not a checkbook, but a business card for a legal aid society and a reputable employment agency that helps seniors find work. I slid it through the bars. You said I would be on my knees in a month, I said softly. I wasn't, because I was willing to work. I was willing to start at the bottom. If you are hungry, you will do the same. It's never too late to learn how to survive on your own merit. You would let us starve, Phyllis gasped. I am letting you go, I said. Just as you let me go. You taught me that I didn't need you to survive. Now I am teaching you that you don't need me. I turned my back on them. Meredith, you can't walk away, Phyllis shrieked. We are your parents. I didn't stop walking. Franklin took my hand. Marjorie put her arm around my waist. Don't look back, Marjorie whispered. I'm not, I said, and I meant it. We walked up the driveway, the sound of Phyllis's cries fading into the background, drowned out by the rustling of the wind in the trees and the chirping of the birds. By the time we reached the patio, the security guard had escorted them away. The gate was secured. The silence returned to the garden, but it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was clean. I sat back down at the table. My tea was still cold, the ice cubes barely melted. Are you okay? Franklin asked, squeezing my hand. I looked at him, then at Marjorie and Walter. They looked worried, ready to catch me if I fell, but I wasn't falling. I'm better than okay, I said, picking up my glass. I'm free. That evening, after the guests had left and the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, I sat on the veranda with Marjorie. We didn't speak for a long time. We just watched the fireflies dancing over the lawn. You know, Marjorie said softly, when I found that wallet in the diner 15 years ago, I didn't just find an assistant. I found the missing piece of my heart. And when I returned it, I replied, I didn't just return money. I was handing in my resignation to a life that didn't value me. They will never recover from this, Marjorie said, referring to the Kensingtons. Not because of the money, but because they realize today what they threw away. That is a grief that never ends. I nodded. They chose their pride over their child. I chose my dignity over my inheritance. I think I got the better deal. You certainly did, Meredith Whitmore. She smiled. I leaned my head on her shoulder. The nightmare was over. The 15-year-old prophecy had been broken. I hadn't died in the gutter. I had built a castle not out of stone and mortar, but out of love, hard work, and the unshakable belief that I was worthy. As I sat there surrounded by the peace of the home I had found, I realized that biology is the least important part of a family. The Kensingtons gave me DNA, the Whitmores gave me a life. Life has a funny way of answering the questions we are too afraid to ask. I used to wonder if I was unlovable because the people who made me didn't want me. But standing on the other side of that gate, I learned that being unwanted by the wrong people is actually a blessing. It clears the space for the right people to find you. If you are reading this and you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you just because you share a last name or a history, let this be your sign. You are allowed to close the door. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to build a table where you are celebrated, not just tolerated. My name is Meredith Whitmore, and I am living proof that the family you choose is the only family that matters. I have 2 questions for you today. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to save your own future? Do you believe that chosen family can be stronger than blood relatives? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening.